Good day, my name is Richard Lowe and I am the owner of The Writing King. Today we're going to talk about how to train yourself, or what kind of training to get and education to get to write a memoir. I was asked that the other day, how do I become a person who can write a memoir successfully? Do I just sit down and start writing? Is there classes I can take? Well, there's a number of things you can do. Number one, you can take classes specifically on writing memoirs. They are offered, some of them are on the internet. I'm sure you could find some in community colleges or at local libraries and things like that. Those tend to be very specific and they're very good to take if you're writing a memoir. I would recommend them, especially if they're relatively short and relatively cheap. Go take them. I would tend to favor an in-person thing at a local library or a local community center or something like that over the internet on those, because you're going to want to interact with somebody who's actually written one or several people, maybe even a group circle where you're figuring it out together. So that's one kind of training you could get. The second kind is go take some training on how to write fiction and how to make a successful fiction story and how to plot and how to do character arcs and how to do story arcs and all these various things. If you're not familiar with arcs, one of the things that makes a story interesting or not interesting is called arcs, character arcs or story arcs. An arc is how does a character change over the course of the story. So if you're looking at a story and you see that the character, when he starts, he's an angry person, and when it ends, he's an angry person, and he really hasn't changed, that person has what's called a flat character arc. And that's basically usually a one-dimensional character. If you want to have 3 dimensions to your character where the character is more alive, then you create a character arc where the character has some losses and then learns some stuff, and by the end of the story he or she's become knowledgeable or has changed somehow. And you can see this in movies like Star Wars with Luke Skywalker. He starts out as kind of a bratty kid, your average bratty teenager who's full of himself, sort of, and who thinks he's all good and stuff. And by the end of the series, he's changed quite a bit if you just watch. And it makes the movie more interesting. It makes the character more interesting. And then you can see flat character arcs in like the Next Generation TV series. If you look at Riker, the character arc's pretty flat. Riker, basically, at the beginning of the TV series, is pretty much the same character at the end of the TV series. There's really very few changes in him. He hasn't learned much. He hasn't experienced much. I mean, he's experienced a lot, but he hasn't really changed. And it makes Riker kind of a boring character. He just doesn't change. You know that. Homer Simpson is another one of those. From story to story, there's very little change in Homer Simpson. He has these grand adventures, and there's very little change in his life. And he's still living in the same house. He's still doing the same things. He still thinks about people the same way. He still makes the same mistakes. He's got the same job. Very one-dimensional character. Very, very doesn't learn anything. Now that part of that's forced by the story format. Typically in TV series, especially that kind of TV series, situation comedies, you want to have the characters start the same every episode so that somebody can jump in and they're oriented already. That's a pretty standard way to do things. Story arcs are the same thing. So the story moves along and it has a series of changes in the story, in location, in characters, in what happens in towns and cities and things like that. And you can have character arcs or arcs for cities. So you could have a city that is all happy and stuff, and then they're invaded, and then they change, and then the people learn, and so forth. And you can have character arcs, quote, quote, in quotes, for all kinds of things. So anyway, that's something you would learn writing fiction, learning how to write fiction. And it can be very useful. You can also take courses in how to write nonfiction. So if you were going to make an autobiography that was more for coaching, you would learn how to write nonfiction stories and books, and you would put it together as a nonfiction thing. So this happened in my life, and here's what I learned from it, and here's what I went on from it, and it's more of a fact-based thing. And works best to combine all of these different kinds of classes. So take some classes. My advice is to take some classes on how to write fiction, how to write nonfiction, how to write memoir specifically, and other things, and get some coaching in there perhaps from somebody who knows how to coach, and and can help you. You could either coach with some of your friends who are also writing memoirs, maybe they're a little more advanced than you, or you can hire somebody to do that for usually an hourly rate, and they'll work with you until you're ready to go off on your own and write it yourself. So those are some thoughts about how to get trained and educated in how to write memoirs. This is Richard Lowe. I'm the owner of The Writing King. I do have courses on how to write fiction and nonfiction on fictionmasterclass.com. They're inexpensive. You buy them and you download a PDF file, and it has a series of how things work and exercises and stuff for you to do. And you can find my services on thewritingking.com. I also offer coaching services. So if you happen to be watching this and you want to get some advice on how to write your memoir, you can call me up and go to my website and put something in the contact form and get hold of me. Thank you very much. I hope this has been helpful.